Well, why don't we just start from the beginning? Tell me what happened yesterday to the best of your recollection.
So I woke up and my husband was actually he woke me up and he said, they're here. And he didn't have to say anything else because since this summer, I have been expecting someone to come knocking on my door sent from DeSantis to just arrest me and take me away. And so when he said they're here and I heard the banging, I knew what that meant. I emailed immediately my lawyers and said they're here to let them know that, they have to come find me in jail. And then I looked for some, clothes to put on because I wasn't dressed. I think I ended up putting on my husband's sweatpants and went downstairs. And I every moment after that has kind of already been out there. Sorry, let me turn this off so it doesn't get in the way.
No worries. Yes, we kind of got the play-by-play from the video, and then we heard you in the background saying, "Don't point weapons at my children," but FDLE says they didn't do that.
Well, the video shows them pulling out their guns after I said that my husband and my 2 children are upstairs, and they were pointing them at the top of the stairs where my husband was holding our 2-year-old daughter and my 11-year-old son was behind him. There's actually more video of them coming down the stairs and everything, but Twitter only lets you upload like a 45-second clip, I think. So that's where it stops.
What was that? What was going through your mind when they came through the door? They had their guns out. What were you thinking?
I always assumed that the first time I had a gun in my face, I would be terrified, like unable to move. And I saw it right in front of me. And almost a second later, they went into the house with their guns out and pointed them at my kids. And it was like I didn't care how many guns they had pointed at me. I could have flinched and been shot. And seeing them going up the stairs, knowing that my 11-year-old and my 2-year-old, who was very likely to just run down the steps, were in there, all of a sudden I didn't care that they were pointing them at me. And I think you can kind of hear that when they're asking me to calm down and I'm saying he just pointed a gun at my children. Like, how dare you tell me to calm down? And I thought they were there for me. So I had just assumed the second I was outside, it'd be over, but it wasn't.
It sounds like they took some of your equipment, your computer, mobile devices, and you haven't been charged. They haven't levied any charges against you at this point?
No. According to the affidavit, there was some kind of unauthorized login to the DOH system that has a shared password with an untold number of people. And DOH determined that it was unauthorized and provided the IP address that they said it came from to the police. The police verified that the IP address belonged to me, but did not verify that the IP address is the one that accessed the system. So it was all based off of the word of my former employer, who I'm currently in a whistleblower lawsuit case with. And that was apparently enough to do what they did. But no, there's no charges. They said it could be 8 months before I get my equipment back because there's a backlog. And I'm sure they're not unaware of how expensive that equipment was to get and how customized it was. And it's taking me quite some time to kind of build that back up. But as of tonight, my site is back up and running. And I said I wouldn't miss more than a day. So I'm going to keep doing what I do until they eventually come here and arrest me for something.
You said you knew this was coming. Why do you feel that way?
When I first watched what happened in May, before I had spoken to anybody in the press, while I was still technically mulling over my options as to whether or not to resign, and then the governor went on television and defamed me in front of the vice president of the United States, I realized that this was a game that I was not going to win. And when I decided to build my own site, and after people cared that I did that and paid attention to it, I just assumed the governor would be coming after me to shut me up eventually. That he'd find something or some way to invent something and just storm down my door, take me, and I would be in jail, and there's nothing anybody could do about it. So that's what I assumed was happening that morning.
Any reason to think that it was happening now versus, back in May or a little closer to when all of this initially blew up?
Around the time that they say this message was sent, the state fired quite a few of their lead people, including the director of communications, several of the managers within DOH. They've actually referred to it publicly as the purge, and which it makes total sense that somebody who was being fired or knew they were being fired would send such a message from a system they already had access to. But I don't know. I'm not on the inside anymore. I have no idea what sparked that sudden firing of everybody. It was right after the election, and everybody says elections have consequences. So I have no idea why they decided to fire everybody or why to come after me now. I asked that thing to my lawyers. I said, it's been 6 months. Why now? And a lot of people seem to think that this has to do with cleaning house, that this wasn't even really about anything I had. It was about who I've been talking to. And I've been speaking with people who are at the highest level of their state agencies for months, who have told me things that DeSantis was doing or shared information with me that would be incredibly damning to him. And all of those sources are in my phone. So and they get that by taking my phone. I mean, they know that a computer sent this message supposedly, but they took my phone. So
you're not necessarily disputing that this breach happened. You just
I don't know. The first time I had ever seen the message was actually yesterday when it was published by, I think, the New York Times. One of the reporters there forwarded a previous story that she had published. I didn't even know this was going on. And I had heard rumors that there was a message sent, but I didn't know what it was or what the context was or when it was. I had assumed the whole time that it was the former director of communications who was fired about that time, or somebody who would know how to do that. But I never thought in a million years that I would be the one being accused of it, because I have no interest in anything that's going on inside DOH that isn't given to me legally. I've never published any data that's not already public. I've made that very clear. And I don't think that even a message like that would have had an impact. I don't think it would have motivated anybody to come forward that wasn't already deciding to do it. I've made public pleas in the past for people with DOH very publicly in the Miami Herald to come forward. And that is, I've been a very public facing person about how to get people to speak out. And that's not the kind of stuff that I would do.
Yeah.
And I'm not even good at computer stuff. So people think I'm like, it's weird because I worked 6 months to have people refer to me properly as a geographer. And now again, I'm a data scientist. And I'm like, I don't do that. I don't know the first thing about computers. If something's wrong with your computer, I'm liable to make it worse if you ask me to fix it. Being a statistician doesn't mean you know how to program computers. It means that you know how to analyze information. Those are not the same thing. That's like saying because you know how to use email that you can hack into any email account. That's not how that works. I've never taken a computer programming course in my life. But I mean, I'm flattered that DeSantis said 6 months ago that I wasn't a data person and would have no idea what to do with a database. And now all of a sudden I am this genius hacker wizard behind the scenes doing these covert messages to people.
Yeah. So. What I think is so interesting about this situation is that, obviously you have such a history and this seemed to come out of the blue. I
don't think it was out of the blue.
Do you feel like it was pinned on you? Do you feel like that's what they were doing, was they were taking a situation and they were just leaping to conclusions? Or do you think that there was malice behind it?
No. the Sun Sentinel article that came out the day that the warrant was signed was pretty damning for the DeSantis administration and for him personally. And I was a source for that article. And I've led sources at DOH and other state agencies to journalists who have published work like that, who have come to me and said, like, hey, who do you trust in the press? I need to talk to somebody. And that article was probably the single most largest indictment of DeSantis yet. And the day before, the largest academic study to date on coronavirus in schools was published. I wrote it, and it came out and was very damning of how cases have been impacting school populations here. The day before that, I co-authored an op-ed in US News about how schools needed to be closed based on the things that we were seeing going on in Florida. So I actually had pretty big successful week, and DeSantis had a pretty bad one. And being one of his most vocal dissenters and critics, I'm not surprised. I mean, the hack that they're claiming happened weeks ago. So I have no idea why that particular day, but I had a good week.
Well, and I have to drill down on this, it's part of the job, but the IP address they're suggesting, that's their, crux of evidence. How do you explain that, I suppose?
Well, that isn't really evidence. It was just DOH saying, here, we have this IP address. This is where it came from. That's not any kind of investigative lead. That's just taking DOH at their word. They would know where I've accessed the system before because I worked remotely from home using a DOH computer in the past. And the police themselves have not tied that IP address to the message that was sent. They just said that DOH gave them that IP address as the source, and then they confirmed who owned it. So I'm not sure. We'll get to the evidence in court. I'm sure of that.
What's next for you at this point? I know that you said that you're vowing to continue fighting against the administration and challenging their data with your own. Can you kind of give me an idea of what you want to do going forward after going through this experience?
I'm going to keep doing what I was doing the day before this happened. I'm going to go back to working with the COVID monitor and my Florida project. And I'm going to continue doing research and publishing, and none of this is ever going to be enough to make me say, I don't feel like what I could potentially lose is worth more than what would be lost if people didn't actually have the information that they need, because that would be lives. And my freedom isn't worth anybody's life.
You've got, some critics that have popped out after what happened last night. Of course, you've had critics before. And one of the things that I've seen a lot of people ask about, and I got to ask about too, is, you created this GoFundMe page after the termination. And I think you were able to garner like 240, according to the last check that I saw, 240,000. Really? That's what I saw on GoFundMe as of like today. Now, I don't know if that's your page, but it looks like it is. And then you had also created a legal aid page. So I guess, what are the differences between those two pots of money?
So my lawyer suggested that I start a legal page because I'm going to have to bring on new lawyers, criminal lawyers and investigative lawyers, and going to have private investigators going through all of this. And that's going to cost a lot of money. And my previous page that I haven't fundraised for in well over 2 months, I think, was just to pay my salary to do this job, to pay for my tech that they stole, and to pay for software and data access and all of that stuff. And once that stopped fundraising, I really kind of just was like, okay, well, this will be our last month. I think it was August. And, from then on, I'll just keep doing this and living off of this until either this is over or people don't feel like they need it anymore. And the legal fund, if it's really that high, that's a lot of support. And it's always nice when you're up against a tyrant like DeSantis to see that the people are behind you.
Do you feel that? Do you feel like you've
I
got
do.
a lot of support behind you?
Oh yeah. And sadly, I don't think if I had that video and I had told people, look, they came into my house and drew their guns, and pointed them up at my kids, that anybody would have ever believed me. And that's really unfortunate. But sadly, it's also not that unique. People deal with overly aggressive police all of the time, and they don't have cameras set up, and no one ever believes them. And I don't feel like what happened to me was particularly awful. I'm okay. My family's okay. We did survive it. It could have been worse, but it's a situation that happens way too often. And if I hadn't had that camera up, I think no one would really care what I had to say about what happened.
I know we touched on this last night when we were sitting in the garage, but you don't know anything about this hack.
No, no. And have it attributed to me is strange. But like I said, I knew they'd invent something someday. But I never thought it'd be a cyber crime.
Well, are you expecting a long, protracted legal battle? What are your attorneys telling you?
This will be on for a while. And that's likely due to the fact that they're going to want to drag this out to keep this constant pressure on me, to make me afraid, to know that, if I get pulled over for speeding, I could possibly just get arrested. And that's a very heavy fear to have on you all the time, being afraid that this is the day that they're going to come. Because once it goes to trial, they'll be laughed out of court, and then it's over and I don't have to be afraid anymore.
You really expect that? You expect that they don't have any evidence and that they're...
No, I don't think they were looking for evidence, or they would have taken the multiple computers that were laying around that they said, oh, well, if this is, for your husband's work, we're not going to bother with it. When it easily could have done whatever it is that they think was done. They just took the work computer, my beast, and took my phone. And it wasn't a phone that was used, according to them. So I think this was a 2 birds, 1 stone situation where they got to intimidate and threaten me while finding out everybody in the state who's been talking to me. And, that seemed like a win-win for them. But thank God I hit record on that camera.
Is there anything else that you think is important to get out there that maybe we haven't touched on?
Yeah, there were over 7,800 new coronavirus cases today in the state. We are inching closer and closer to 20,000 deaths, and that's based on Florida's verified deaths. That does not include the between 6,000 and 8,000 excessive deaths that the CDC thinks that Florida has underreported. Florida has never reported or even tracked probable cases and deaths. So that will be work that will be put together painstakingly by academics for years to come. The situation is not good right now in Florida. We are seeing case increases in under 18 that outpace every other age group because we decided to open schools brick and mortar. And I haven't had the time to run the schools data today like I normally do, but I fully expect we'll be past 25,000 school cases. And really, that is what matters. That is the information that matters, is what's going on in the state, what's happening in schools nationwide, and what's happening with this virus. And all of this is just another way to get people to ask me about things that aren't related to that.